My husband's sabbatical has become pathetic and I want it to end right now. We're both early 30s, married, no kids. We own a house together, mortgage. My husband worked for the same company for almost a decade. He earned a good salary, but the last few years were rough on him thanks to his overbearing boss. He discussed quitting every so often, and I was open to the idea as long as he had another job lined up. Well, last year, he quit spur of the moment over a seemingly minor dispute at work. He would later call it the straw that broke the camel's back. No other jobs lined up, nothing. He assured me that he had savings he could live on and that he wanted to take some time to recalibrate. He also had a few business ideas he wanted to pursue before getting back into the workforce. Trying to be a supportive partner, I said okay. Fast forward to today, he has no income and literally hasn't sent out a single job application. He hasn't even updated his resume. What has he been doing these past 8 months, you ask? Smoking weed, a bunch of scammy work-from-home bullshit that hasn't made him a dime, and most recently, trying to become an Instagram influencer. Yes, seriously. To be fair, he has also done some handiwork around the house and fixed up some things. But for the most part, he spends his days smoking weed and dicking around on Instagram, and I'm effectively subsidizing it. We used to split bills 50-50, now it's more like 80-20ths. The last time I tried to have a serious talk about his future plans, he jokingly said I could divorce him and pay him alimony if I didn't like the current situation. Then he broke down and wept, saying that he might be depressed. I felt horrible for him and offered him my full support, but in retrospect, I'm curious if it was just a convenient excuse to pivot the conversation and get me off his back. What would you do in my shoes? I have grown resentful of him and this whole situation. Update. First, thanks to all who responded to my prior post. A lot of good advice that has helped me navigate this situation. On the day I made my last post, my husband and I had a talk that night when I got home from work. I basically said he needed to make a doctor's appointment for his mental health or cut out the marijuana use, or both. He repeatedly refused and actually got a bit hostile about it, which is not like him at all. Then I moved on to finances. I asked him how much of his savings he had left, and all he said was enough. I pressed him for a dollar figure and he wouldn't answer. I asked if he had a balance on his credit card and he said no. When I asked to see his bank statement to confirm, he basically told me to fuck off again, hostile and out of character for him. I told him that the current arrangement wasn't working and that he'd have to start paying 50% of the bills on March 1st. At this point in the conversation, he completely shut down. He wouldn't even look at me, he just sat looking away from me with tears in his eyes as I talked. I doubt he even heard a word I said, but I clearly stated all the other issues I had, the Instagram stuff, our plans for the future, etc. After this conversation, he stopped sleeping in our bed. For almost a week now he's slept in the basement. He basically doesn't leave the basement when I'm home unless it's to get food. Honestly, it's pathetic. I am going out with some colleagues this weekend for a fun night, and my husband can stay home like a hermit. I also have a coffee date planned for Sunday with my best friend. I am going to tell her everything and get her opinion. Because honestly, this isn't the life I want to live, and trying to correct it only made things worse. I am beginning to think of divorce as a real option, which would have seemed outrageous even 3 weeks ago. Thanks again for reading and giving your input.
Relevant comments. Commenter. Your husband is clinically depressed and needs to see a doctor. This is a mental health issue that only gets worse, and the marijuana is a part of the feedback loop. He needs professional treatment as soon as possible. Commenter 2. How long has this marriage been going on? It seems like you're used to everything being 50-50. But it's not how it always is in reality. I'm not saying put up with this shit. But your husband is clearly in a bad place and needs help. The way you explained confronting him about all of this sounds, to him, like an attack. We know it isn't, but it's probably how he felt. And 9 times out of 10 he knows you're 100% right. It sucks to hear the truth. And it also sucks to feel like a complete failure, then be told every way how you're completely failing. Both my fiancé and I felt this way when we had to essentially switch off on taking care of the responsibilities. It was embarrassing having to depend on him, and it was unbelievably embarrassing for him as the man in the relationship. We had countless difficult and emotional talks about this. Again, I'm not saying put up with this because you're married. I'm only commenting because of the fact that you seem to be really focused of this 50-50 thing, and I personally feel like marriage isn't always going to be 50-50. Sometimes it's 49-51 and sometimes it's 8-92. Does he contribute to the household at all? Like, does he cook, clean, do laundry, finish home projects, runs house errands? Or do you also take on those responsibilities? If you're also doing all of this, it's extremely unacceptable and he is taking advantage of this situation, but again, I'm not telling you to deal with his behavior. Just trying to help find a solution. You know your limits better than anybody else. Don't forget that.
Update 2. Thanks again to all who responded to my prior thread, even if I didn't agree with the characterization of my relationship by many of the commenters. I did take some advice to heart though, including not sharing my husband's issues with my friends. My husband continues to sleep in the basement. I asked him a few times to start sleeping in our bed again. He'd say maybe but never actually do it. We have stopped having sex entirely, but I have heard him watch porn in the basement. On the morning of March 1st, we had a horrible argument when I asked for his half of the monthly bills. He e-transferred me about 2/3 what he should have, and when I asked for the rest he exploded. He just kept saying fuck off louder and louder, over and over as I tried to say that he needed to contribute his fair share. Then he started talking about his depression again. Literally the only time he will up his depression is when I'm criticizing his shitty life choices. He hasn't even seen a doctor or been diagnosed, yet he uses it like a get-out-of-jail-free card to be totally unproductive and not pay bills. So I told him point blank, either see a doctor for your depression and start fixing your life, or this marriage is over. It sounded so harsh, but those are honestly the only two options at this point. He made some quip about me paying him alimony if I divorced him, not the first time he's said this, and that was the last we spoke of it. We have briefly seen and talked to each other since then, but there's no warmth there anymore. It's like we're roommates. Last week he told me he booked a doctor's appointment and I was happy for him, but as far as I can tell he never ended up going, even after I offered to take the day off and drive him to the appointment. I don't think he's left the house in over 2 months. I have stopped cooking him meals, so he now subsists on instant noodles he bought off Amazon. I met with a divorce lawyer for the first time earlier this week. He was excellent and gave me a comprehensive rundown of all my options. When I told him about my husband's alimony comments, he laughed and said not a chance. He voluntarily quit his job against my wishes. He has no official diagnosis from a doctor that would preclude him from working. I don't know where he got it in his head that he'd be entitled to alimony from me. I am holding on to a shred of hope that my husband will put forth some kind of effort to get better and repair our relationship. I pray every night that he'll do a complete 180 and start being his normal self again. But if nothing changes, I plan to meet with my lawyer again sometime in early April and officially file for divorce. Update 3. First, thanks to those who left comments in my prior posts. Hearing advice from all angles really helped me make practical, informed decisions during this extremely volatile time in my life. The TLDR version is that we are separated, with plans to divorce in 1 year. I finally got him to see a doctor. I wasn't in the room for the diagnosis, but the doctor suggested my husband look into cognitive behavioral therapy and SSRIs. Of course, my husband was opposed to both. He could read about CBT online, and I've known for a while that he's outright hostile to the idea of taking antidepressants. He describes them as brain warping. We had a week or so in April where things almost felt normal. We talked more, ate dinner together, slept in the same bed together, even had a date/movie night. I felt so hopeful. Things truly seemed to be getting better. It didn't last though. We had a fight about something completely innocuous and things quickly fell apart again. One day after work, I sat in my car and was completely overcome with dread. The thought of going home to my broken relationship, it was too much. I drove around aimlessly for hours, wondering how in God's name my life had turned out like this. Half the time I was sobbing. I must have looked crazy. This was my breaking point. I was done with the relationship and the marriage for good. When I told him my decision, he wept openly, as did I. He said he was sorry but that he understood. He didn't ask me to reconsider or make any effort to save the relationship, which tells me it was right decision for both of us. He moved into his parents' basement a few weeks ago. I am still in a rough place emotionally. I pray that time will heal me and that I'll be able to find love again.